Wix or Squarespace?
So can I have a third option? Like
Yes.
Wix, Squarespace, and like no, honestly, there's nothing wrong with Wix or Squarespace. But you know, I don't know. We've got a long conversation ahead of us as we talk about simple website builders. There's a lot to unpack there. I think there's a lot of fans. I think there are a lot of detractors. I have opinions, and believe it or not, I actually like Squarespace. Like I
Have
actually
you
really
ever
like
made a Wix
Squarespace.
site?
Uh yes, I have. And that leads me to have like not very
Interesting.
like, so here's the deal. I made a Wix site. It was for my wife for her. She was putting together her portfolio. She's
Mm-hmm.
an instructional designer and put the portfolio together, and it was really difficult to manage. And finally, like after like 6 months of using Wix for all of this stuff, she's like, why don't we just put me on WordPress? And I said, thank God. And I went to export the data, and it turns out that that's not how Wix works. Wix doesn't store the text as text. It stores it as like
No.
layout elements. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had like this whole big thing. I caveat all of that because that is before they released, what was it? Editor X, I think is what they call it. Like their updated like editing interface. And so like that new interface, it might be gold. I just haven't used it. So I'd love to talk to somebody about that. Do we know anyone who has done anything on Wix?
Do we know anyone, period? This is Designing Good Company, and I'm starting to realize we're just each other's company. We don't
We
know
are.
anyone
We
else.
are.
We don't know. We went to DrupalCon and we left with no new friends. That's not true. We met a few people, and we do have somebody here today to talk to us about why Wix is superior. I'm really excited to present our friend, CEO, and founder of Wix. Oh, wait. Hey, Amanda.
Hey,
You're not the
Hello.
CEO of Wix.
probably would not be on this podcast if I was right now.
She's like, if I had anything else better
that
to
is a
do.
burn.
Is it a burn, or is it just
Oh.
like just stating facts? She's like, if I had anywhere
I'd
else to
have
be,
bigger fish to fry right now.
yeah, Squarespace. You'd be frying Squarespace. That's what you'd be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting competitive in that market. It's absolutely getting competitive. But before we get into like Wix a little bit more, Amanda, welcome to the show. And like, so Broderick and myself, we've expressed our nerdery on this show many, many different times in many different ways. And I'm very interested in like what makes you weird.
Great question. First of all, thanks for having me. I am very much
Hi,
a
nice
good
to meet
weird
you.
person.
Why are you weird?
It's funny
It's my
because
go-to question at parties.
the
Okay.
first time I ever met Broderick, he asked me what I was like interested in, and no joke, I said death just because
Oh man, this podcast is off
I
to
could
some
talk
sort of
about
start.
death and like deconstructing death very often at parties. So that's something that makes me, I guess, a little weird.
It's not
I tell you what,
normal.
Caitlin Doty's web series, what is it? Order of the Good Death web series. Have you seen those? Oh, if you like death, let me tell you, like Caitlin Doty, she's written several books. She is
Yes,
a
I
funeral
have
home
her.
director in LA.
I have a graphic novel that she's written the foreword for. So yeah.
Oh yeah, seriously. We my wife is going to a conference near where the Donner Party died. And so we're planning on like doing a family trip out there. And we rewatched Caitlin Doty's like Donner Party like coverage where she went to like the site and covered that whole thing. For those of you at home who don't know who the Donner Party is, the Donner Party are it's an unfortunate circumstance where some people there was cannibalism. Google it.
Yeah. I feel like I learned about that in 3rd grade. It was probably my intro to cannibalism.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to just really think about how to
The
backpedal
key
out of this.
words for this podcast are going to be all over the place.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so
like,
let's talk about
no.
entertainment instead, like Cannibal the Musical.
No,
So
no, Randy, no. I let you open today. You opened and you took this thing, and and to be fair, to be
I made
fair,
it weird.
Amanda's answer is on point. You asked, you started with why are you here, and answers death.
Yeah.
Like maybe I don't know.
And I'm wearing
I'm
like a
not gonna
bright yellow shirt and I'm smiling and just for
smiling and
those
all
of you who can't
happy.
see,
Yeah.
yeah.
Greet death as a friend. Okay. Well, the show's not dead yet. We just got started. The YouTube thing's starting to get kicked off. But we do want to talk about why you're here today because, yeah, as Randy was talking about beforehand, we're talking about Wix sites. And you've made a few of those. You've
I
put
have.
websites together. You've designed things like attire for professional sports team logos. You've done all sorts of different branding like designs for. I mean, you can talk about your experience more than I can. I know you because yeah, we've worked together in the financial sector, but also for years we've hosted a Star Wars podcast together, and it even got us all the way out to London. And I did have someone who's like an attorney from like the Lucasfilm side at one point I was talking to and said, "Hey, your branding and design is really good. It's your own thing and everyone knows it feels like Star Wars, but you're not copywriting anything. So I just want to give you an attaboy and keep it up." And we're watching. And so
They're always watching.
Yeah.
they're always watching. But when it comes to design and especially design for websites, Amanda, don't you just you primarily use these simple website builders?
I do. In my past, I've had experience working for full service advertising and branding agencies. I've also done in house and like contracting work. So I've had a lot of opportunities to work on everything from like Elementor and WordPress, which is kind of like a little bit more advanced of that WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get builder. But my own website is done in Squarespace. I've built plenty of Wix and I hesitate to call myself like a web designer or even like a UX designer because it is very front end design focused. I'm not like hard coding things like I was back in the MySpace theme era days. But I know how to make a template look better than your normal template. I suppose. I can add more care and design detail to your pages than just sort of the simple click and drop, but there is definitely a big advantage to working with sites like that when you have simple website needs.
So one of the things that I just heard you say, I want to push back on a little bit, and that's like this idea that because you're not coding, you're not actually a web designer, and that is, in my opinion, one of the farthest things from the truth. Anytime you're making decisions about a user's experience on a website, you are making web design choices. And so, like, yeah, maybe you're not hand coding something, but you're choosing colors, fonts, sizes, the relationship between things, how the information architecture goes on the page. All of those decisions that have to be made exist for small and for large sites, regardless of the tools. And so, Amanda, I would call you a full fledged web designer.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm going to start upping my rates now.
Do it. Do it. Uh,
All of her clients have just like left this call just afraid. So
No, but I what I love about designing websites is exactly that user experience. My favorite part of being a designer is thinking through the user experience of everyday life. I also love print design for that same reason. When you get like a print piece that holds your attention and you unfold something and reveal more information and capture their attention that keeps them reading more, that's the same thing. That's also user experience. So it fits into all parts of design.
I know quite a few either web designers, developers, whatever, that are just like, in fact, I have a really good buddy who just like detests Wix. I mean, with a passion, just hates any of those platforms. And they're just saying, oh, it's like there's no art in it whatsoever. Yet I was talking to someone the other day that's a content strategist and said, if you're trying to design a website that's super complex, she said, you're stuck in 2015. No one does that anymore. And the user, I don't care what the designer wants. The user wants if they want more information, they'll go check out your podcast. They'll go check out your YouTube series. I'm not there for that. I want to know who you are, who you serve, is it me, and why do you do it? And then I want to be able to find some button onto where I can get in touch with you next. Now, that's not a one size fits all, right? The University of Kansas isn't going to have that simple experience. But there's a lot of smaller businesses, and even not smaller, I mean, there's a lot of large businesses that operate exactly that way. But you'd never think, oh, well, what's a great business example that probably has something like that? Maybe like Otter, the AI transcribing service, pretty simple,
Mhm.
right? Zoom, but you'd never think, oh, Zoom, you just download the software and use its website for some basic functionality. Like you'd never think one of those platforms, I don't think they are, but you'd never think they would be run on a Wix. So what's the threshold? Is it company size? Is it need? Is it a certain amount of users on the website? At what point do you just realize, oh yeah, we've outgrown the house?
Randy, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So here are my thoughts on this. All right. So one of the things that I like to do is connect people with the tools that are going to benefit them the best. And the trick is finding out where does the complexity lie and what level is the complexity. Like if it's somebody who has like a dozen pages, maybe a dozen pages and then infinite number of blog articles because they're writing content every week or something, my recommendations have a tendency to sway like straight towards something easier or simpler. Like I generally go for like WordPress, Squarespace. I've used Wix before. As I said in the opening, it did not leave me with a good impression, but like I said, they've changed the editor since, so maybe it's a better experience now. I want to leave myself open for interpretation. I don't want to be canceled. But when the business needs of the website start to get complex, like when you have more than two or three site admins, when you have content that starts requiring relationships between the content in order to function properly, whenever you start having like large categorizations of content. Some examples that I would give you is, okay, so if you are a small publisher and you are publishing like, say like new books, like every couple of months you come out with a new book. In the first couple of years, any of the builders that we mentioned would be perfectly fine. Squarespace has very robust, like selling features. So does Wix. But once it gets to a point where you have like 50 products, and maybe you're also doing like stickers and shirts and bags on top of that, and you have all of these different SKUs that you have to like manage, and you start having like collections and want to start like managing that, that's when you start to think like, okay, I need to do something, like maybe I need to move to Shopify. Maybe I need to move to like Drupal Commerce. Maybe I need to go to like WordPress's WooCommerce, because those are tools built for that larger complexity. And so, like for some companies, as they grow, like, these smaller website builders are a stepping stone to get where they're, stepping stone along the path, so to speak. So that's kind of my interpretation. It's that complexity of the digital stuff that's going on, is where that threshold is.
And to add on to that, since I do a lot, I don't focus solely in website design. I see that come into play as a designer with Canva as well. There's a lot of people that will be very upset to hear that I, as a graphic designer, use Canva. And I think it's a great tool for like self-sufficient small businesses, setting
Mhm.
people up for easy access of their brand elements. So that way they're using me for bigger projects where they need like more hands-on design. I think Canva's a great tool. And so I quickly shut down people that are like, well, real designers don't use Canva. It's a tool that if your client finds it useful, then you should be able to use it.
Canva is
When
an amazing tool. Sorry, Broderick, go ahead. I just wanted to put in Canva is an amazing tool.
Yeah, and when you're putting together, let's just say you're meeting with a prospect and they want something, they don't know what they want. They don't know if they want a Wix site, a Squarespace site, a WordPress site, a Drupal site. I mean, you ask them any of these things, they'll just be like, I don't know. Oh, I know what I want. I want a .com site, right? Like that's what they're going to give you. When you're trying to decide in the beginning what you should use, do you have any sort of like questionnaire or something, some sort of process you follow to find like, oh, okay, this is the route we should go? Like, because if there really is no like in the beginning, one size fits all. How do you identify what is the right starting point for that potential client?
It depends on what existing needs they have. Like, do they already have a website, or are we starting, like, totally from scratch? This is the first time that they're gonna be
Yeah,
Googleable.
this one's totally from scratch.
Yeah, I think, yeah, as long as you aren't starting like a Fortune 500 company from the get-go, I think having a Wix or Squarespace, as an entry level website is a great starting point and could service you plenty into like the first few years of your business until you decide that maybe your business has gotten too big to handle it.
Yeah, someone who says, I just want to get this landing page up. So maybe, yeah, there is merit in using Wix because of something we talked about before, Randy, was something that makes it easy for them, empowers you to, yeah, the empowerment's there, but also gives the ability to be flexible. And Randy, you were talking beforehand about, in a different episode, about creating a flexible brand with small design decisions. So if someone's new to the podcast today, what does that exactly mean, and how does like Wix help folks with that?
So Amanda, I'm gonna want your thoughts on this.
Mhm,
But so my philosophy as a designer, whenever I start establishing like a brand for a client, I like to create a brand system for that client. All right. In web design parlance, like design tokens are kind of the hotness for the the current years and whatnot. But basically, I kind of like think of it as in terms of like these brand decisions. Like these are the font families, these are the font sizes that I'm going for. These are the like color bars, like the primary color, secondary color, and then like tints and shades to like define my palette and how I can then work from that palette. I know that Squarespace allows you to define all of these things inside of
mhm,
Squarespace. You can say header fonts are this font family, body is this one, and you can create like a strip of colors that it then like with that information it derives a bunch of styles to provide to you to be options. Like if you want like different like strips going down a web page, you just tell it like, strip 1, strip 2, strip 3, and it changes those styling. And for me, that those small little decisions can then be carried forward, that those tints and shades of colors, that font family, the font sizes can then be brought over to like print design. It can be
mhm.
brought into motion design. And that creates a great deal of flexibility. I don't want to go too far off the deep end with like design tokens and whatnot, but what are your thoughts on setup like that, Amanda?
Yeah, to your point, it gives you a strong foundation and options. So you're not like, okay, I can only use 3 colors and this color font can only work on the light color background and now I only have, yeah, like 4 different ways that I can showcase my brand. I have Squarespace for that reason. It's great to be like, okay, I want a lighter background, but I have too many of this one color. But I think that from the get-go, starting off with those shades and a big thing to also call out is like web accessibility colors and
Mm.
buttons.
Yes.
That's something from the very beginning I like to provide with a client so that way there's no coming back around to web accessibility. It's there from the very get-go, so everyone has the same language around, "Hey, only these colors and this font size should be used for all of our buttons." And then, like you said, how it translates into print, you're building a overarching story and language of your brand that makes sense to your visitors on site or in person. So they're used to seeing the similar hierarchy of text and color both in and out of your website.
So if you're starting with the colors, what do you say for last, Randy? If you're starting there when you're putting your website together, just the brand, I mean, take us through, if that's point A, what does point Z look like? And what's the last thing you should do?
Well, let's be honest about what this path looks like. It is not like a sidewalk going down the street. It really looks more like in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, when Chevy Chase lifts up the giant ball of Christmas lights and hands them to his son. That's what the path looks like, because, there are patterns, but there's a lot of looping back and intertwining. And what I mean by that is that, like, we start with what we think are a reasonable set of like font sizes and colors. And then we start building out, like, okay, here's what like an article page would look like. This is what it would look like if it's got a bunch of headers. This is what a document would look like. And then suddenly I'm looking at looking at the font sizes, and I'm realizing that that context changes the decisions I want to make. So I go back and make changes to the basics, reapply them, refine them, and then build upon them again. And build out this kind of like this system on top of this. And then, like, from that article page, then it's like, how do I want to present photography? How do I want photography to be used? There's, you know, we spoke earlier, I told Amanda, like, you're a web designer because you're making these choices. Like, choosing the photography, choosing how to break up that text with like different patterns makes a world of difference. And that's the big difference between a good website and a bad website, which is something I don't think that like we've brought up yet on this episode. Is we've talked about like these small site builders and these big site builder. Well, we haven't really talked about big site builders, but this is a Four Kitchens podcast. We do big websites. But the reality is that like you can create really high quality websites with good design decisions with any website builder. At least
Mhm.
that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think, Amanda?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Back to like the question about throwing a single landing page that belongs to sort of like a larger education website. It's the same thing. Solving a problem is mainly what our job is, and there's so many ways to go about it. If you want to be more complex and someone like wants the more complex option, then there's that available. But I just like I was saying about Canva, sometimes like working with the entry level is able to, with good design choices, doesn't look like an entry level platform.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I like about, some of these website builders, and Broderick, you might have an opinion on this. The small website builders, to be competitive with each other, they create like hyper focused niche experiences that are like selling points. Like Shopify is a big example. Shopify, like you can build a website, but it's really focused around selling things. So if you have like 3 pages plus a shop, just spin it up on Shopify.
Mhm.
Um, Squarespace allows you to have like protected pages, like password protected pages. Like I tell you what, as a developer, when I put on my developer hat, I never remember how to do that, and I don't ever want to do that. And Squarespace just lets me say like, "Here's the password," and it's done, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. There are also, and Broderick, I brought you into this because there are like website builders and services that specialize in like hosting podcasts. And so I don't know if like, if there's, I don't know, maybe Wix and Squarespace address that. Maybe there's something in that space that you know about, but like, there's a bunch of things that tailor specifically for that. Like I think Anchor FM, if I'm remembering correctly, allows you to build a website around a podcast feed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and when you create a podcast in Buzzsprout, they have their own little mini podcast website for you. Most people I know that want to create a podcast site typically start with a Wix because it is pretty simple. It's like, here's the homepage, here's where you can find the show, here's an episode page, which most people, if you use a Libsyn, if you use Buzzsprout, I mean, most of them have some sort of embeddable player that you can put on that episodes page. Oftentimes, you'll see someone put together a blog page with show notes and things around the episode, and then an About Us page where people can get in contact with you. Now, depending on the show and what its purpose to do, there are a lot of folks out there that also create merch where proceeds go to like nonprofits or whatever else. Sometimes they have pages about their sponsors and about the podcast page. So a little bit more robust, still a pretty simple lift. But then once it's created and they paid for it on Wix, they never go back to the site ever again.
Yeah.
They've got it all listed. And by uploading content to the various, like to your RSS, well, now it's just going to keep getting updated every week outside of maybe, yeah, if you have a blog page or whatever else. So, yeah, lots of folks will use those because it's more customizable, but it's still so darn simple. But back to your last point, when I do connect with people who have podcasts, they really get caught up on that homepage first. But in this case, doesn't that kind of make sense when we're talking about something so simple that doesn't that make sense why you would start with the homepage? Because realistically, we're talking maybe 3 or 4 pages. We know what the other ones look like. Maybe all there really and they've maybe all there really is to do is to figure think through that homepage. Or I mean, and I see that too with some of these podcast sites where the homepage is the only page because everything just lives there. Here's the podcast. Here's everywhere you can go find it. Here's a link, like a form to get in contact with us. Bye.
Yeah, don't make people click. You know,
Mhm.
why make them click if you don't have to? The webpage that I made for our podcast, Design a Good Company, you can listen to the audio files right there on the homepage, without any you don't have to click through or see
Mhm.
anything. You can just play it right there. I hand coded it because I'm a glutton for punishment. But that's just, the way I am.
Another benefit I wanted to call out on these sites too is that they have responsiveness built into it too, mobile
Oh
responsiveness.
yeah.
Because otherwise that's going to take a developer to build from scratch a whole different process. And having your website optimized for a mobile experience is critical because so many people are going to be viewing it on a mobile. I like how easy it is to also hide different sections in Wix, where I'm like, okay, this section that I've built is has a lot more columns and is a little more complicated than what can be supported on mobile. So I can just hide this little piece. So you see it on the desktop version, but it's not disrupting your experience on the important stuff on mobile.
Absolutely. I so I have to admit, this is a place where I experience a little bit of frustration with Squarespace, and that is like the mobile experience. And I think it's just because I'm so used to being able to code things and being able to say, like, if it's a small screen, I'll arrange it this way. And if it's a large screen, I'll rearrange it. And Squarespace is trying to use tools to make that easy. And my brain is making it hard to do that. And so, like, I run afoul of like trying to make sure that like is working. And so I'm glad that they have a lot of tools to make that easy, because I tell you what, I look at analytics a lot, and I see like there are a lot of users coming to websites on mobile devices. And if you have a terrible experience on mobile, um by improving that, by having one of these website builders that builds great responsive themes, then your people coming to your site is going to go up, because
Mhm.
I don't know about the two of you, but I am always on my phone looking at websites. So
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here too. I'm looking up some of the best websites within Wix. And yeah, I mean, everything looks really simple. It's really clean.
And I think we've come full circle around that design trend of making like overly complex non-responsive websites where you like just infinitely scroll and things like slightly move. I feel like I've noticed people prioritizing simple website designs for less clicking
Yep.
to convert a lot quicker.
Yeah. And I think I mean, there's a plethora of organizations out there. I mean, I feel like the majority of businesses could leverage Wix or Squarespace for exactly that reason. If you want more information about that business, go find them on social media. That's where they've got their story and everything else. Like, I would be interested to know how many people who come to learn more information about you actually visit the about page on average? Like what percentage of those website visitors?
I mean, maybe I'm as a designer, I have, like, a bias, but I love the about page. I go to the about page when I order pizza at a local place because I'm like,
What?
"I wanna." Yes, we so I recently moved to Kansas City, so I've been trying to find new local foods and stuff, so I'm not ordering Domino's, I wanna order from a pizza place that's nearby and small family owned, and yeah, I'm looking at the about page. I wanna know kind of what their philosophy is and why they're doing this, how long have they been here, like, as maybe as a designer, that's just
So when there's
kind of
data that
in.
shows younger millennials only want to do business with those they feel are on the similar mission as to their own. I met you. I finally know which one someone. I'm like, that's
Yeah,
not me. I just go to
even when
Google
it comes to
reviews.
pizza.
Yeah, I go to Google reviews. I'm like, how legit is this?
Well, and this comes back to like there's no wasted page on your website, or at least there shouldn't be any wasted page on your website. You're constantly like telling your story and finding ways to tell your story. Because think about this. Like you go to that pizzeria's website and you read the about page, you know, if it's poorly written, or it seems like it was written, I don't know, 40 years ago, it very well might have been, taken straight from the menu from the original owner. That tells you a story about that. That tells you
Mhm,
that like this is a shop that cares about like what they're doing. They don't care so much about like marketing and promotion. And maybe they're a little bit more old school. And that sets your expectations properly for that kind of pizzeria. Where
mhm,
another pizzeria where it's like maybe they're like, oh, we opened up in 2005, we only use the finest ingredients, we're like trying to get a Michelin star for pizza, and telling a different story. Set your expectations up for an entirely different experience, both of them being good. Because I've gone like, there's a local pizzeria in my town that is like the owner is from Italy and barely speaks English, and great pizza. I love it. But I also go to a pizzeria where it's like, you know what? I want the chicken makni, like Indian style pizza. Thank you.
mhm, mhm,
There's a financial advisor I know who I was talking to. They do their firm. I mean, success is different for everyone, but for themselves, they're like, hey, we think we're doing pretty okay here, and there's a lot on our website. We want to simplify it. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what do you want it to look like? They're like, just a homepage. It's our logo with the H1 tags, just who we are, who we serve, and like basically that's it. I'm like, how do they get in contact with you? They're like, I don't know. Maybe they need to already have our information. Like, we need that level of exclusivity. I'm like, okay, that's like bonkers. That's like crazy town, crazy town. Need a little bit more than that. So talked it through and said, okay, maybe like they can schedule time with you, but there's like the about section for them says, okay, like this is the kind of person we work with, our minimums, whatever else. And then if they want to get on our Calendly, well, what if we make it so it's like they can't even book something for like 3 months? And I'm like, jeepers. And sure enough, like if you create a website like that, you're going to attract a very specific client who's like, maybe they are ultra high net worth and they see that. They're like, oh, it's just a page, very simple branding, and they're booked out for a while. Oh, with good Google reviews, there's this level of exclusivity. I want that. And so this person who's like, hey, I want less business is now just booked up with prospect calls for months out. And you're just like, that's wild. There's like no information on your website, and everyone wants to know more.
Mm. With those artificial scarcity tactics, you have to be careful because they can backfire.
Interesting.
Like
Tell me more.
what if that multimillionaire is like, I'm going through a divorce, I need to move funds, like, I need to have it happen soon, and I can't get on this person's Calendly for like 2 months. Time to move on to the next person.
Hmm.
mhm,
And so like now admittedly, I do not know that market. So I can't say whether or not like, taking the slow train is perfectly fine. And that you don't want to deal with like fast trains, um, it's entirely possible that that exclusivity does better for them, because every tactic that you use marketing wise pushes people away and pulls people in.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And the best marketing tactics pulls people in who love you and pushes people away who suddenly hate you because you've like drawn whatever line you've made. We can talk about that in a future episode. I love talking about that,
I'm
but
excited for that episode.
um, yeah, but artificial scarcity is one of those things that like if you pretend to be unavailable and then no one shows up, you know.
It's a strategy. I mean, I could see why someone would try to spin it that way and
Yeah.
make that, but I also would worry about appearing like a scam or
Hmm.
being too elusive to be like, why would I want to trust somebody that doesn't want me to know who they are?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a level of, I mean, a good example for me when I was looking at going to restaurants in Paris, and I was like, oh, I really want to get like my first Michelin experience. We're talking about that earlier. I really wanted to be a restaurant here. And there were a lot of websites like that, that they were very like, yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll call them pretentious. Pretentious sites. We're like, we know we're better than you. We don't have to
Mhm.
try. We are, it is our name. And one place, like the about section, all they had was, it was like, this isn't dinner. This isn't food. This is an experience. That's all the about section was. And you were like, dang. All right. But then you go to like look at reservations and oh yeah, some of them were booked over 3 months out. And you were like, okay, like, I guess this is legit. Now, maybe that's a little bit different of experience, right? It's not your retirement, it's a dinner.
Yeah. It's about calibrating to make sure that the right people are coming in for your experience or buying your service, as opposed to trying, like, I mean, that's what all of these different tactics are. Like that, it's not dinner, it's an experience. They're basically kind of telling you, like, it's not just show up and eat, have a good meal and leave. It's going to be several courses. You're going to like go through the motions of the experience. It's a ride at Disney, except it's dinner, you know?
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's about setting those expectations correctly. Um, one example of that. So we were talking about like someone wanting to seem exclusive by creating like, pushing their calendar availability out. There was an agency that about 10 years ago it dissolved. The principals of the agency basically were hired by Facebook for an ungodly amount of money, and so they brought their agency to a close. The agency was called Tehan and Lax, and on Tehan and Lax contact page, they did like top-notch high quality work, like some of the best in the business. And on their like contact form, they basically said like, our starting point with new clients is $750,000 a year. And they just put that right above the contact form. Like it wasn't a brag. It wasn't a
Yeah.
like it wasn't presented like a like,
Meant to
oh,
weed
can you.
out the people.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just like, it's like, listen, like if you only have $200,000 to spend, we're not the agency for you. It's going to save us time. It's going to save you time. Go find the right agency. And I thought that that was absolutely brilliant because it declared their value. It helped their pipeline. It like, and obviously it was really successful. I mean, until Facebook bought them.
That's my new minimum. Now, I'm just gonna put that above my contact us form on our site. Do not contact me unless you have $1
Unless you're a
million.
millionaire.
That's not true.
I'm just gonna put $20 or a six pack right above my contact
$20 or a
form.
six-pack. That's
Oh, so okay. So I've got a story. When I lived in Indianapolis, there was an organization that was forming called Trade School Indy. And what it was is people would get up and they would teach something that they knew about, and people would bring gifts for the teacher as like a thank you. It was trade school, trade. And so like when you're the instructor, you would say like, oh, I'd really like these items. But it wasn't like anyone had to bring them. It was free. People could show up. So I'm teaching an HTML and CSS class. And I had asked for, I'm like, you know what? I want crayons. I want coloring books. My daughter was 2 at the time. You know, I listed all of this kid stuff. All right. I listed like 6 things for kids. And then I was like, and Mike's Hard Lemonade, because I like Mike's Hard Lemonade. I like sweet alcoholic drinks. When I got home, I unpacked so many cases of Mike's Hard Lemonade that it was all over my kitchen and the kitchen table. My wife comes home and she's like, "Is there a sorority mixer happening here? Like, what's going on?"
You can offer a bunch of options, but ultimately people are going to want to bring what they want to bring.
Yes. Yes. I also had a giant stack of coloring books too, so it wasn't
Okay.
bad for my daughter. So, but man, I tell you what, I drank so much hard lemonade that summer.
So one thing is when anyone's getting started with a side hustle, or when you're putting together a business, a startup, whatever, oftentimes people will take whatever work they can get, maybe $20 in a six pack. That's like, that's great. All right, just get help me get the name out there. I would love to know for both of you, what is the wildest form of payment, like that we can advertise on this, or like talk about on this podcast, that you've received for making a website or some design service for a
So
business,
I
agency,
have an
influencer?
answer to this, but it's not something that I have received. It's from another friend of mine, and
Oh,
I'm
sure,
really
sure.
jealous.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm really jealous that they exchanged a website for a back tattoo. And I was like, that's pretty nice. That's
That's
pretty
pretty
nice.
sweet.
Depending on the
Yeah.
talent of the tattoo artist, that could have been like
Oh yeah.
a
That's
super
a
fair deal.
yeah.
So my story involves a car accident. No one was
Wow.
hurt except the only person who was hurt was my ego.
Mhm.
So I was going through a thing and I bought a Mazda Miata. All right. Little tiny convertible car. Itty bitty. I'm living in Pittsburgh at the time. And I'm like, all right, you know what? It's the only car that I own because I very much am into public transportation. So it's like the only car I own. It is, I'm trying to think. I think it's November at this time. And the day is cold. And I'm like, it's cold, but I want to run out. I'm going to go and do some errands. And I get in the car and I go down over the hill and I notice it's snowing, like way more than I originally thought. And I'm like, oh, my car does not go really well in the snow at all. And I'm like, all I have to do is go across this bridge, go back up an alleyway, and I'm home again safe. So I go across the bridge and begin to spin. I spin around 360 degrees. The car behind me rams right into my car, just tearing it apart. I'm angry, mostly at myself because I'm like, it's snowing. I shouldn't have done this. Like, what an idiot am I? The tow truck company that towed me, the guy's like chatting with me and he's like, "Hey, oh, so what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a web designer. I design and build websites." And he's like, "Oh, we need a website." I'm like, "Let's talk trade."
Yeah.
So I built them a website from start to finish. It was built in Drupal because this was many, many years ago. And like I got thousands of dollars of car repair from a website.
That's beautiful.
So yeah.
That is the
Wow.
great thing about having a design skill set is that, yeah, you can use it to like trade and barter in some ways,
Mhm.
When the economy comes crashing, we
Oh,
will survive.
the designers. The
Yeah.
designers will rise up with their paintbrushes in hand
Yeah.
or whatever, or
We have a
their
service you need. Yeah.
the economy comes
Okay.
crashing down and design will be the first service. Hey, no, Amanda, we're all toast, and that no one's.
I have a special skill in hand lettering and calligraphy, and I always used to say like I would probably be a very successful homeless person because my signs would get a lot more attention. So,
See,
I
makes me
have that
nervous
as my in my back pocket if I ever need to.
what makes
There
me
you go.
nervous about designers like Amanda is they're not afraid of death, and they're talk about like the economy collapsing, and I'm like, you're the kind of designer that would like create some image just because. and all of a sudden it would spark an unintended revolution. And it just becomes this flyer everywhere. And I'm like, look at what you've done. And they're just like enjoying watching the world burn, just death. I'm just like, no, what? How did we get here? But that's the power of design. I mean, like, I'm sure that happened in other revolutions. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just thinking of TV shows.
Hey, never underestimate the power of influence, and design is the art of influence.
Well, and design is also about communication and understanding. And that is probably the most valuable takeaway of what design can do is make things easy to understand and help people understand what your business does.
Yeah, you brought it full circle and you like completely took where I was going with this
You're
revolution thing,
welcome.
and you made it more about like, being a business podcast. After the revolution though, I am taking it back there. After the revolution, people will be coming to me because people are going to want to talk about it. And that's where podcasters come in. They're going to want someone to be like, who knows how to use a mic? We're in this post-apocalyptic world without power. I'm like, I've got these like fake mics you can use, and boom, we'll do these impromptu podcasts with tape recorders. It'll be awesome. And then I'll be the one peddling tapes on the street for everyone to listen to, their favorite podcast hosts. That's the future. That's what I'm excited about. But for folks who don't have to wait for that day and they want to learn more about Amanda and what you do and some of the designs you've done and awards you've won and how it's taken you around the world, because we didn't really talk about that much today. Wasn't really a good interview show. We just really talked about Wix sites and design in general. So for the folks who want to learn more about you, where do they go?
You can check me out on LinkedIn, Amanda Walla, Walla, and I have a website hosted by Squarespace called wallacreative.com. And yeah, you can see some of my work there and hopefully send me more work.
There you go. You've heard it
Awesome.
here first. And if you're a designer, if you're a creator, if you're a web developer, and you want to just jump on another podcast like this, well, yeah, Design a Good Company is your place. Look, we don't know exactly what we're going to talk about. It may be death. I'm hoping next week it's life, but we'll see. It might be a little unhinged or it might be really structured. You get to decide. Come on to the show. We have a LinkedIn page. Go check that out. We have a website. Randy made it. Wasn't on Squarespace though.
Hand coded with love.
Hand coded with love and art for you. We made this for you. We'll see you next week.